Thanks, Dan. Wow, this is loud. Okay. So whoever's controlling the mic, if you could tone it down, that'd be good, because I'm going to scream. Wow, okay, thank you. Oh, much better. Okay. If this is not loud enough, let us know. But I tend to speak loudly, so sorry. Okay. So if you don't know me, I should present myself a little bit. I'm Sawyer. You might see me as Sawyer X. It is not one single word. Sometimes people write me as a single word. It is two words. I'm the pumpkin for Perl 5. That means that I'm, in a sense, the project manager for the language. I decide which features make more sense, which make less sense, which fixes we should do now, which fixes we should do later, which fixes we should avoid. I help settle discussions on the core team. And I get to present our work, which is actually a lot of fun. It might seem like I control a lot, but mostly I work with really, really, really smart, capable people that help me understand things well and help me make decisions together. So I just want to share that out. If you think that I control it, I actually don't. So what I want to do is talk about past, present, future. I'm mostly going to focus on past and future, which is usually not what I do. I usually talk about present. So this is going to be a bit different, and I hope it's going to be good. And if you have feedback after, feel free to talk to me on this topic. If you see me anywhere and you want to talk to me, please do. Don't feel uncomfortable approaching me. So please feel free to come over. If it's complaints, yelling, stuff like that, you could skip that. But if you just want to say hi, introduce, you want to talk about something, please do. So we're really at the idea of, does this even, thank you, yes. So we're at the point of 20 years of conferences, and I thought it might be nice to cover 20 years of Perl. Perl is beyond 20. But if we're doing 20 and 20, then we could cover what we did in 20 years. So this is a graph of all the releases that Perl has been seeing each year. And you can see that around 2010, which is when 5.12 came out, we started doing way more releases every single year, which we do. We put out between 10 and 12 releases every year. Almost all of them are development releases that come out every single month. There's one coming out actually in a bit, a few days. And then once a year, we put out the full stable release. And then from that point on, we have additional releases with backporting fixes that are important or small corrections, stuff like that. So we are doing really well. The graph goes down for this year. So it should come back up, okay? Because we haven't finished the year. Additional graphs. These are the changes that have been happening in core when it comes to size. There's the core, the libraries that we have, all of the libraries that are bundled with the language, all of the libraries that are an intimate part of the language, all of our test libraries and all of our documentation. This is the amount itself in kilobytes, and you can see it really grow. There's some shift that were really interesting there, lower near 5.12, where we kind of moved a lot of the things from external to embedded and stuff like that. We're playing with those things. This is the files themselves, so it keeps growing. And I really like, if you look at the green lines here, those are the amount of tests that we have. We have a lot of tests. We have a lot of tests. So let's go over a little bit of what's been happening. In 1999, 20 years ago, we were working, I say we, I was in the picture. We were working collectively on the release of 5.5. So there were a bunch of these releases of Perl 5.4, and 5.5 came out, and then really past that point it was 5.6, which is what I want to talk about. And this was the person in charge of it, Sarathi. I hope I'm pronouncing it well. Larry, corrections? Sarathi, thank you. Good, okay. It's always important to pronounce names the way they should be. And does anyone want to share one thing they know happened in 5.6?
I screwed up Unicode.
See, it's good, because I can't say Larry screwed up Unicode. That's what happened. But you are right. Unicode. Unicode and UTF-8, this is like the best sidekick. Okay, so Unicode and UTF-8 came out. Larry, I'm going to play with you on this. UTF-8. And then it's fun because I get to joke about things that not everyone knows why I'm joking about this, but those they do, they really like it, right? So, okay. 5.8 came out. There were several people in charge of 5.8. It wasn't just 5.8.0, there was 5.8. There's several versions of these, and I think they all deserve credit. There's Jarkko, and he's Finnish. I'm not going to pronounce his last name. On his website, he actually has an audio of how you pronounce his last name. I'm not going to try to do that. We had Hugo and Raphael and Nicholas, and they were all involved in working on the 5.8 and releasing versions of it. Something that came out in 5.8, working Unicode, better Unicode. So we had a new implementation, a re-implementation of threads, following with this, threads. Okay, but then came what I would consider a more modern age of Perl. So we had 5.10. 5.10 was by Rafael Garcia Suarez. And what came out in 5.10? So first we had use feature, which is really nice. Perl-uppercase E that automatically enables all of those features. The defined OR, which is really, really, really useful. Yeah. I never had an operator get an applause. That's great. Such a supportive audience. Wow. Okay. We had name captures. This is actually one of my favorite features, obviously. It's really useful. State variables came in. Unicode 5 came in. And these two particular variables also came in. Does anyone know what they do? What was that? Other than Larry. Everything is other than Larry here. Yes? Printing of numbers, yes, controlling printing of numbers, and one of them has to do with matching. So I'll go back to those variables because they were officially deprecated. Okay. Then 5.10.1 came out by Dave Mitchell. Dave decided never to release another stable version. And it mostly dealt with resolving a few issues that came out of 5.10. 5.12 came out. That was Jesse Vincent and Jesse really revamped how a lot of these releases happen. That's why we have more regular releases and frequent ones. So we have the package name with a version now. We had the ... What is this called? Yada yada. Very good. Okay. And it really, few people know it inspired the Seinfeld episode with a yada. No? Okay. My jokes. Unicode 5.2 came out. We had pluggable keywords. Pluggable keywords are really an amazing feature that most people don't know about, but we have that. Version number formats were revamped and clarified in a sense, right? For better or worse. Parent came into core. It's really good. And use feature Unicode strings also was introduced, which is also very good to know if you're dealing with Unicode. Jesse also did the 5.14 release, which introduced Unicode 6, introduced the Unicode abbreviations, which you should probably use. It introduced the search replace that is non-destructible. Yes, that deserves if any operator, really, truly. The block package syntax, which honestly I never use because I separate two different files, but it's really kind of cool. Custom ops, this is one of my favorite features because I wrote an entire module that uses custom ops to introduce new ops into the op tree during compilation or to replace the use of the ref function. It's called refutil and it uses specifically this. It's an amazing feature. And then Rick came into the picture. Rick put out a lot of releases. He put out a lot of releases. 5.16 was his first one. It had the sub. I have a few bits of code to represent some of this. This is one of them. You can see this is a very simple code to just go over a tree and print out all of the nodes recursively. And this is one of my favorite examples of sub because really what you want is to go back inside. And if you have a named subroutine, you could do this. But if you want to do it with a callback, it's a bit harder because then you can't use the callback itself because you leak or it's kind of tricky. But here you can just use underscore sub underscores and that's it. And then it references itself. So it's very, very, very simple. The amount of statements here, other than the say, is just like 3, 4 including defining it. So incredibly simple. I think it's an example of simple Perl, clear syntax, that does exactly what you want it to do. Okay. 5.16 also had 6.1. The documentation says mostly. Unicode symbol names. So you could use Unicode in symbol names, which is something so important if you're writing small examples for Twitter, which people have. And then the fold case function came in. The fold case function includes something really cool. If you want to compare two variables, they're strings, use EQ, and then you want to know that they're the same, you're going to lowercase both of them and compare. And that makes a lot of sense, except in Unicode. If you're not dealing only with English, which a lot of the world is, that won't work because they don't fold the same way. You could do uppercase, also wrong. The correct way is actually to use a regex, because the regular expression engine has support for Unicode, which is really, 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 really nice. But we have to make sure that we do well, so we're going to have to quote it with Q and E, and then we're going to have these anchors for the beginning and end. And if you look at it, it's kind of weird. The caret and the dollar they're not exactly the same. What you want, if the complementary for the caret is actually the lowercase \z or \lowercase z, and then we want to use the case insensitive, which really is where it's at. There's a better way to do this, and it's just FC, which is pretty cool. Okay. Rick also worked at 5.18. 5.18 had experimental warnings, which is nice. 5.18 had the hash randomization. I don't know how many people remember this part, but a lot of testing suites broke because they assumed that hashes would always be the same order. So if you call keys on a hash, and then you call keys again on the hash after changing it, it would just be the same. If you start the process again, it would exactly be the same, but it shouldn't be. So if you actually think of how we change hash functions, different versions of Perl could have different hash orders anyway. So we actually added hash randomization, which was a really big security improvement. Unicode 6.2, regular expression set operations, which I haven't seen enough people use it. It's really nice. Regular expression set operations allow us to do this thing, which basically says, I would like to capture something from Thai or Laotian, and I want it to be a digit of one of those two, which is a really, really interesting way of presenting it in a good way. I think it's really cool. So this is another example. I want all the word characters except the lowercase, right? So that's pretty cool. Then we had lexical subroutines. We had computed labels. QW without parens. Does anyone remember this? So if you look at stuff like for each, you do a for each, my foo, and then you put in parentheses and you give a list of things. QW used to be able to assume that there are parentheses around it, which doesn't make sense. Because for each, the syntax is for each, arguably maybe a variable, and then braces to put it in a list of stuff. But with QW, you could avoid that, which broke the syntax. It was really weird. So we fixed that. You can still define arrays this way, but 5.20 came out. 5.20 had experimental signatures. So we finally had signatures. It was about time. The subsets, I love this hash slice, and I want to present some code that explains it. So I do a lot of hash slices, a lot of array slices. I really, really, really like that, because then I can access multiple things at the same time, which we like to do. So if you look at this list of days, and we want to grab the first day and the last day, we can do a slice that says go to the array, and we're going to use the @ symbol here because we want to say multiple elements. We don't want a single element. If we access a single element, it's $1. But if we want multiple elements, it's going to be the @. And then we give it, in the brackets that really show us this is an array, we give it two indices, 0, -1, first one, last. And we apply them to two variables. We can also get several of those. So this is the flip-flop operator. This is an example of how you would use it on a hash. So we can access two keys and get two values at the same time. I love this. I do this often. So access both user and home, apply two at the same time. Now, here's the tricky part. I have a hash here with 3 keys and corresponding values. And I would like to access foo and bar, but then I would have to use a map if I want to store also the keys that I accessed. So I would have to do a map in which I send foo and bar and then apply foo and then the value in foo and then apply bar and the value in bar, right? It's kind of icky. So let's play with what we can do with hash slices. So we'll take the @ symbol that means multiple keys, and instead we'll put in a hash symbol. And the hash symbol here says, I want keys and values, not just accessing multiple keys from multiple values. So foo and bar, and what will happen is that it will actually take out a subset, not just a set of values. In this case, foo and bar will return foo1, bar2. You could also do this on arrays. What would that return? Louder. Indexes. I'll accept that answer. Indices, I'll accept that answer as well. So if we take the array, we give it to 3 keys, indices, and then we get a list back, and that's going to be 3D, 4E, 6G, which means that, by the way, we could also apply it to a hash instead of just a list. And that's how they correlate. Yeah, it's really nice. I like this. Okay. More things that came out. Postfix dereferencing. It's really, really, really nice. So, very quiet clap. Okay. Enthusiastic, though. I'll take it. We have here an array ref, which is just a reference, a pointer to an array. And then we want to access something in it. And then we want to copy the entire thing. So we're just going to prepend it. I don't like writing this. I always correct code when I see this because I think it's confusing. And instead, I like to surround this with braces. So I think it's a bit clearer. But it still kind of always wraps the whole thing. And instead, what we can do now is use array ref and then an arrow and then just say @ and star. And the way that I read it is go to the array ref, dereference it, and get that list inside it, and the star is like all of it. Just give me all of it, the entire array that this references. We could do this here as well. So in the old days, we would just arrow and then just find one thing and then just surround the entire thing again. And instead, we could just go to 1 and then arrow and then @star. Just give me everything that you find there. This is a good example where we would go to the keys, find the people, and then we can just say, just give me all of it. Just give me the hash inside that thing. And then I'll iterate over it. Unicode 6.3 also came out in 520, literal control characters in variable names. So you used to be able to define variable names that had literal control characters. Now, I'm not sure why someone would do this, but Perl allowed it. Yeah? Oh, tickle. Yeah. Now, I'm not sure why someone would use it, but... Oh, okay. I thought you were mentioning tickle. I'm too young. Yeah, I had color TV. I can't. We had refrigerators. No, okay. Okay. Interpreter-based threads were officially discouraged, not because they don't do something, because they probably don't do what you think they do. But I think it's actually interesting that we discourage something simply because we realize that we know what it does, but that a user might not see it the same way. It might address it differently, use it differently, see it differently, so we discourage it. And I think it actually shows a lot of thinking about the person themselves and not just us and our implementation. So I really do appreciate this as just the concept, the way that we work. And we also added copy and write, which is a very, 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 very good, useful optimization. So basically, data will not be copied when it should be. Instead, it will only be when it's read. It will only be copied when you actually change it, which is really big. And we also had an automatic regex optimizer for everything you write. It's pretty cool, because I write crappy regex. Okay. Well, hopefully not, but 522, again, Rick, just so many releases. The diamond operator came in, double diamond. So the diamond operator is just what you use as a read line. You read like one record at a time, or you read the entire file if the right parameter is set to what a record stop is. And the double diamond, was a way to do this in a more secure manner. So every time you see the diamond operator, change to double diamond operator, because then you're richer. Okay. All I have is like really bad jokes. Unicode 7 came out. Does anyone know what came out in Unicode 7? Honestly, I'm not sure. I just threw it out to see what people will say. Okay. Aliasing via reference. I really like this one. So aliasing via reference, let's say that we have an array of hashes. Now what we would normally do is walk over the references, right? Because it has to be a reference to hashes, so it's hash refs. And then we walk over the references and then we dereference each one to access the stuff. But what we can do is we can use aliasing, which means to bind a variable to another one in a different way. It's not a copy of it. And then to use a reference to do this, and suddenly we can walk over the hashes themselves. And the hash here, if we alter it, we actually alter the value inside the array of hashes. So it's even stronger than what we would do. It's pretty cool. Okay. CGI was finally removed from core. You might have seen one of the first really big talks that I gave at conferences was CGI PM must die. It was littered with insults and screaming. I apologize partially for it. I received an email from Lincoln D. Stein, who wrote it, and said, I have seen your talk, and I would just like you to know, I fully agree. But I did not know much when I wrote it, so please accept my apologies. Okay. 524 was another one by Rick. Introduced Unicode 8. I think Unicode 8 is really, really big because it introduced the diversity system. So I want to give a few examples. We load the char names, and then we could use the uppercase N to use the abbreviations. And this is what's called a zero-width joiner. It's a way to combine characters together, emojis and Unicode characters. And what we do is add the heavy black heart and the variation selector 16. Does anyone know what the variation selector 16 is?
It's a variation selector.
It's a variation selector, technically correct, not what I was hoping for. It's red. It's red. So this creates a red heart. And then we take a character of a person, we take another mark, we, of course, output UTF-8 because my terminal needs to know this. And then we just use the zero-width joiner to combine all those together. This will create one single emoji, just one, of all of those combined, which is incredibly powerful. And the amount of code that I wrote is very little, and it's 100% readable. Like, you know exactly what this does. And this is what it comes out as. Like, it actually works. So the diversity system added this part as well, like the whole idea of capturing people's skin tones, you know, representing people the way they are. And I think it's very, very powerful and something we supported very early on. I'm really, really happy with this. So, what else? The auto-deref. So you might have noticed I did not tell you when auto-deref was introduced. I do not want you to remember this. I do want you to know it was removed. The lexical $_ was also removed, also not a good memory. The multi-deref op, one of my favorites. What it actually does, if we have this really long statement, a lot of dereferences are happening there, right? Which, if we look at what Perl will do internally, the opcodes themselves, what Perl sees as actions it needs to perform, it's this. Simple, right? That's pretty clear. I'm going to cut out all the stuff you don't care about and you don't need to see just to make it a bit more readable for all of us. There we go. Now, what you're seeing here is basically saying I have an element of a hash and I want to dereference that because it's a reference inside it, and then I want to access another element of a hash, and then you just keep going, and then at the end there you really see the connecting parts of the constants that are used as what are the keys of that hash. Now, with the multi-deref op, we're actually taking all of this. At compilation, we're trying to mix them into fewer operations that basically knows internally to walk that path. If I were to compile what happens once we use the multi-deref op, it looks like this. And of course, I'm going to cut off the cruft, so that's it. That's it. It's a single op for all of it, one. And that's way, way, way faster. You get this for free, by the way. No need to enable this. This is automatically enabled. You just have it. It's part of the language. And 526 came out. This was the first release that I did. That was even worse than just applause. It's just do or don't. Like, don't hang me in the air like halfway through. So 5.26 was the first release that that I worked on, and it was, to me, it was a very challenging experience. So Rick said that I have to do double him in to double his amount of releases. That's very challenging. I don't know if I could. I can share a little bit of the stuff that we did that I'm actually really proud of. We added Unicode 9. We removed dot from ink. And I think as a first release, that was also really hard for me because that was probably one of the biggest changes that I remember when it comes to managing such a high impacting change across like people, companies, libraries, user code, everything changed because of this. My idioms changed, the way I type changed, my memory muscles changed. And this broke a lot of stuff. It was a security change that we realized we have to do it. And you would think that if you were to put security on the table, then suddenly you can do this, everything's fine. No, we couldn't. It was still very, very difficult to push this through. And we had to deal with a lot of long tail of changes that we had to make in code because libraries don't always get as updated as quickly as you want it. Did you know that Perl has one thing that you should not do, but AutoConf library can do? It's because people want to use AutoConf, because it's a really, really useful library for building stuff. But it does one thing that is actually wrong, but we still support it because we know it's going to take a while for that to update. So this was also an example of this. So now Ink, which is basically, for those that are not familiar with it, it is the list of libraries that Perl should look for things to load in. So it goes to these folders and says, do I have a module here? No, I'm going to go to the next directory and see if I have a module there. And then I'm going to have to go to the next directory and see if I have a module there. And dot, which means current directory, where I am now, was by default there. And we took it out, and everything changed. But it was important, and we had to do this. Indented here docs. I love this. I'm going to give you some code if you're not familiar with this. Indented here docs is, you have, let's say, this is a common thing that I do. I have a subroutine, help and exit. And that subroutine receives a message, and if I actually get the message, then I also want to print out the error. And then I usually use a here doc for all of the help text. I double quote it, and I'll put in the name of the script and file and all the options and everything there. But the thing is, I can't put it here because then it's indented. There's a bunch of spaces there. So I have to indent it to the left. Then I have to put the, what is that? Here doc terminator, right? So I put the here doc terminator, but that won't work either. Why? Spaces. There are spaces. I have to do that too. So if we take this thing that says, I have a here doc here, and we add, I'm quoting Carl Williamson, a twist. No, it wasn't? Who said that? I thought it was you. It was Carl, okay? Let's just all agree we're done. And this twist at the end basically says, you know, this is actually I want to indent stuff. So we can now finally indent it. All of it. And it's a small thing, but to me that was a big experience change because my code is so much more fluent. This, by the way, I just want to note, this was written by someone who heard over and over that it just can't be done. And then he just threw a patch on the list and said, I think I did it. What's wrong? And people responded with nothing. And then everyone just paused to think about this. It was so weird. Okay. We also have the XX. So this used to really not do much, and we removed it, and then we added it with actual meaning. I want to show this. So if you use the XX, so who does this? Character classes. You put in D to E, G to I, 3 to 7. I don't know why you would do this. The other one is where you actually have a set of characters, these characters, and it's really, really useful. The problem is that you can't have a space there because then you're saying, I also want a space. But with the X, hey, we can make it clear, we can expand it, not inside, sure, but before and after, spaces, incredible. But with the XS, we can do something better. We could expand those. And that really clarifies what I mean to write. I mean to say D to E, G to I, 3 to 7, and I'll take these, I mean all of these characters. What else? These variables for the captures. If you're not using them, don't worry. We can use this. So it used to, what you're seeing here is actually the aliasing happening on assignment, which we were not sure how, where, should it, could it, and we got this done, which I think is really, really nice. So in this case, A will represent what B represents. It isn't a copy of it, it is a reference to it. It's an alias, which means it represents the same place in memory. And then 528 came out. 528 had Unicode 10. It had Unicode script runs, which is a really cool idea where you can have like a Unicode check for anything that is from the same script. So no one can introduce characters that look the same, but they're from a different script. Or it's really crazy stuff. I'm not aware of other languages that support script runs, by the way. This was another crazy idea from Carl. Well, I think we're going to do this. And he did, and that was it. So we have this. The subroutine attribute and signature order changed, and this is a good time to introduce you to signatures. So signatures look like this. You can put in variables there. You can also, and obviously use them. You can also put placeholders there. The dollar here says, I'm going to have something, but I'm not going to use it, so I don't even need to give it a name. We can also set defaults, which is really useful. We can also use variables from outside and change them. We can also use variables from the signature itself as well as a default. Really nice. And this is another example of a placeholder. It basically just says, and you know, other stuff. Same with hashes. Really, really nice. I love this one. I've been using a lot of my code now when I write libraries at work. I automatically make my stuff import signatures to the user. It's fantastic. Everyone loves it. It's great. The use of bare here doc terminator to mean empty here doc terminator. I only put this here because this was very difficult to get through. It's silly. How many people here use here doc without an actual terminator, without saying when it ends? Does anyone here use it? Did you know you could? Larry, come on, man. So you could do this. Now, you're thinking, oh, I didn't even know that existed, but honestly, I don't even care that that existed because I'm not going to write this. Do you know what an uphill battle it was to remove it? And we had to. You know what we had to? You wanted the indented here docs, right? You got to get it from somewhere. Okay. Syntax collided. Multi-concat optimization, also really nice. When you concatenate multiple things, we do this in one op as well, similar to the multi-deref. And we removed use vars, whoever's using, sorry. And we got to 530. Okay, so really this talk, it was supposed to be about 530. But I think that we don't often go back and look at what we currently have. And I think not everyone here has been in my previous talks where I kind of go over one or two previous versions. And if you look 20 years, we did quite a lot of stuff. It's a lot of code. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of coordination. It's a lot of discussion. It's a lot of knowledge, understanding of people and what they do and what they use and how they use it. We got to 530 this year. I want to start with who made 530. I think it's very important. The following people worked on it. It's easy to get that list. If you just run this code from the Perl trees, you can just compare and get everyone who worked on certain periods. And these are the people who worked on it. Can anyone find themselves here? Because that gradient is some. We got one. We got another. We have some, another. People slowly kind of, okay, I guess I was there. So quite a few people worked on this. And I want to, yes, thank you. Fun thing, Unicode Consortium also gets credit there. Also contributed. So what really is in 530? I mean, you're probably thinking, wow, so many changes. We must have done so much this year. Actually, we kind of relaxed a bit this year, which is good. It's not bad. And I want to show you what we did do. So first of all, my favorite fix, this one. This is what I like that we did. How many people understand what this is? No? Okay. So if you do sort on a subroutine name within an eval of an expression, and the expression was UTF-8 upgraded, it could panic if the subname was not ASCII. Who wrote this?
I'll never tell.
So this actually came from someone who did some fuzzing on code. For those that are unfamiliar with fuzzing, it's basically a technique to just run really weird variations of the syntax to see how it fails. And there are a lot of techniques, and some of them are really, really smart in progressing and finding sore points and then picking at them even more. This year we had a lot of help from Sergey Aleynikov, who helped us a lot with fuzzing. He found this one. We also had previously with Brian Carpenter, other people who really helped. With fuzzing, we can find where the syntax does not really, touches the wrong things and twiddles the wrong angles and all those things, and then we can fix those. So we were able to do that. That was a lot of fun. We did add some features. First, let me see here. Yeah, so this thing, 528 came out with Unicode 10. And we've had situations where we had like 6, 6.1, 6.2, 6.3. But here we didn't go by point something. We went 2.1 versions up, which is really weird, right? Why did we do this? Do you know why? Unicode finally had more updates. So we just updated all of them. Unicode 11 came out in July. We're still working on this. Oh, wow. I'm not going to make it on time. I'm letting you know. OK. Unicode 11 came out in July 20th. Unicode 12 in March. 0.1. We started in April 2nd. They had really the core of it. And then we just improved it a little bit. And then we're done. So we might as well just have it. You know, why not? We have variable length, limited variable length look behind. So if you're doing look behind, you can actually have the variable length of it, like how much. And it's really interesting. If you're using this thing, you know, min, max, your max can now be 65,534. I don't remember who requested that. Some performance stuff. There are a bunch of these performance that usually you would not really tell because they're under the hood. But things like integer stringification, you probably use it a lot without knowing. IV to UV, changing integers to doubles, and so on. These are things you do, you just don't notice, and we've done a bunch of those. We did remove a few things. This is my favorite thing that we removed. You can't do this anymore. For a very good reason. If it broke your stuff, I'm not sorry. Please change it. You cannot assign anymore to this variable. It is a non-zero. It will cause fatal. This was attempted. We wanted to do this in 5.12, so we're finally done with it. Dump was gone. Is finally gone. You could use core dump. That's fine. File glob is gone. Do not use it. You cannot. But what you could use is a better one, which is file glob BSD glob. Delimiters must be graphemes. So where do you even begin explaining that you could use delimiters that are code points that are not representable as graphemes, visible character, and it could be a delimiter. Not anymore. Sysread and syswrite on UTF-8 handles, that it's fatal, we're gone. By default now, JSON PP, which is bundled in core, has allow non-ref. JSON access already supported from version 4. We removed bdebug. We removed locale codes. They're still available on CPAN. And finally, those are fatal. Does anyone remember which version we deprecated it? In 5.10. That's when we deprecated it, and now it's finally fatal. Fun fact, sorry, in 5.10 we tried to remove that. When was it made deprecated? When did we say it's deprecated, do not use it? It wasn't 5.10. 5.10, we wanted to drop it, but we actually, version 5. Version 5 said stop. So if we're looking 20 years ahead, finally stopped. some stuff we're going to remove. Really, there's one thing that I can tell you for sure. If you're calling hostname, you cannot send it an argument. We will remove that ability. That's the next version. Okay, a little bit about the future, and this is the fun part. We do have plans. We do have ideas. But unfortunately, most of them are really too early to really share, because we want to let them soak a bit. We want to let them kind of sit so we could think about them some more, so we could do it better, and then we could share them with you. So I don't have that much to share. I do know that we're going to add some features and optimization to signatures. That's nice. But now comes really what I wanted to talk about. And it took me, just like Jim, quite a bit of time to get there. So you could look at this and you could say, wow, 5:30, it wasn't earth-shattering. That's actually fine. We slowed down a bit, and we were able to take some time to breathe and to think, which is very important to do when you're thinking long term. So stuff that we were thinking about, I was trying to look at why is Perl not as popular as it used to be? You know, we're looking 20 years after, and it's different, you know? And I narrowed it down to a few specific things. So first, the syntax, the capabilities, the tooling, documentation, and the libraries. These are, to me, the areas that we need to still work on if we want to increase the popularity. So I want to cover them very briefly. Syntax, we have a lot of good stuff about syntax. It's not all bad. A lot of it is really good. So first, it's very flexible syntax. A lot of things that come out in Perl, they just happen because the syntax allows it, which is amazing. We don't really have typing, but we do have container types. So when you see a variable, you know that it's an array. You know that it's multiple items. You know it's a key value store. That a lot of languages don't have this. It's the name. You don't know. It's very easy to extend. We can create keywords, and we have compile time regular expressions, which is fantastic to this day. But there are some bad parts. First, and the biggest issue, we have very ambiguous code, very ambiguous syntax. Strict warnings still have to be enabled in one way or another. We have to navigate through patterns. Some patterns are really good. Some of them you should probably avoid, and you have to navigate them. And the biggest way that we do this is everyone here. It's community. It's talking to people, right? Tim Toady is often something else. It can turn into, there are far too many ways to do it. Where some of them you might not want to do it, but you could, and people usually share that as well. So you don't really know what to do sometimes. And I think a big part of this is really, it's hard to learn the syntax sometimes. And it's worse, it's hard to teach it. And until you can teach something, you can't really use it, right? And even if you look at our errors for the syntax, you need to know what that means, because it's a technical error. If you know Perl, the errors are amazing. If you don't, you're not really sure what to do with them. We have a lot of capabilities: procedural, object-oriented, asynchronous. We have the best Unicode support, superb regular expression support. It's fairly fast, considering it's a very high-level language. It's not fully compiled. And magic is actually pretty cool, like the whole magic techniques in Perl. It's being added to other languages now as observables. They just came up with this. They're really excited. We've had this for a very long time. But there are some bad parts. Threading is possible, but only kind of ish. You need to know. Parallelism, we support a lot of forms of parallelism, but you kind of need domain knowledge in order to do it well. It's really hard to get it off the bat correctly. Threading, forking, event loop. OO is minimal in Perl. It's kind of a layer on top of things. And it works really well, but it is minimal. And we have Moose. It's amazing. But we don't have anything like Moose in core. Nothing. And magic, as great as it is, sometimes it makes some things difficult, you know? In tooling, PPI is fantastic. I love Perl Critic. I use Perl Tidy on everything. We have multiple REPLs. Not one. We have several. And we have a debugger that is capable in GDB. It's really strong as a debugger. Our debugger is incredibly strong. However, most of these tools have to work really hard to get their job done. The PPI internals are not simple. Compile time analysis is not available. All of our compilations are document-based, which is very flexible, but it also incurs a lot of costs that we have to pay as developers. We have poor IDE support. And I think it's important, one comment that I spoke to Jim about, the beginners of today are not the beginners of yesterday. I don't use IDs. It troubles me. I have a very simple interface. I am almost always on the terminal, and I prefer Vim. and I edit through SSH. That's it. But you know what? Not everyone is like that. And people nowadays expect IDEs, but we cannot give them good support for it, which is a shame. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying the support is poor. We have a lot of REPLs, but none of them are really awesome. They're not. We need to have a high bar because the beginners of today have a high bar. And the debugger is as comfortable as GDB. Personally, I'm still waiting for proper tools for handling technical debt because we don't have them. I wrote a rewriter for Refutil. That was not easy. It was fun, but it was not easy. The majority of it is actually comments to understand what I'm doing. Okay, documentation. We have a lot of documentation that's really good. We have a lot of documentation. It's great. And it's very detailed. However, we have sometimes too much documentation. Some of it is outdated. And some of it is really hard to comprehend. Who has read here the documentation for the open function? All gray hair. No, sorry. No, it's a lot. It is a lot. It's kind of like a Google result. You go through the first page and that's it, you know? Libraries, we have a bazillion of them, technical term. Easy to create. We have automatic documentation rendering, tight integration with testing. Nothing compares to MetaCPAN. There is not a single language nowadays that can reach the level of what the team of MetaCPAN did. It's incredible. They deserve it. And whenever someone says, oh, you know, we have a really good support for your open source stuff, nothing compares to this. Not a single thing. However, if we are honest, not all of the modules are high level, high quality. It's a bit tricky. CPAN is old. It's got a lot of cruft. XS it's not an awesome API. I would even venture, and if you really are more intimately familiar with it, it isn't an API at all. It's a bunch of functions that are public. It's a bunch of macros that you could call. But it's not a fully thought out API. We need more official libraries. There are a lot of stuff that we don't have that we want to use Perl for. I'm going to give an example of machine learning, because that's a lot of what I do nowadays. For machine learning, there are a lot of libraries. TensorFlow, scikit-learn, Pandas, NumPy, SciPy, Torch, PyTorch, Keras, Magnet, H2O, Spark, Kaldi. We have PDL and PDL stats. And they're very capable. We have support for Magnet. We have support for a few other things. But for the majority, we don't. This is why you would not do data science in Perl. And I work with data scientists nowadays. I work with machine learning engineers. And it's fascinating. They're very, very smart people. And they have zero interest in specific languages. They don't actually care. They're willing to use R, okay? And R has syntax that is not necessarily trivial. You know, we talk about Perl and you look at it and you go, oh, this is weird. You know what? Use R. It's also weird. Look at Haskell. Look at Erlang. Those are languages that are used. Now, data scientists are really interesting. They don't care. If the tool does what they want, they will use it. They're disinterested, which is fantastic. But Perl cannot give them what they want, so they won't use it. And it's fascinating because machine learning specifically, they have the core libraries that really need strong capabilities of the language like C, C++. They need speed. But then on top of it, they have a lot of data munging. Do you know a language that is good with data munging? Like R. Okay, so I'm wrapping up because I want to talk about the future I think we could have. Okay. What if we had reduced ambiguity? What if we had best practices as default, always? What if we had one clear way to do most things? And not to take away from your freedom of expression, but giving you a clear answer to start from. What if we had the same for parallelism, for OO? What if we had simple, easy documentation to learn and to teach? What if we have a comfortable debugger? What if we had a great REPL that you want to use all the time? What if we had better static analysis? Things like semantic rewriting. You could deal with a very large code base. I deal with a code base that has millions, on top millions, 9 million lines of code, thank you. It's a lot. Do you know what it means to make a change across 9 million lines of code? I need tools. We need tools. Better IDE support, and proper low-level interface. So this is the future that I think is definitely possible, but it depends on a few things, and this is what I'm here for. First, we need to make a decision. I think it's not easy. It's between, are we maintenance mode or are we changing things? Do we want to only have stability or do we want to also have ability? We need corporate drive, something that we've avoided so much, but you know what? How many languages can you name that don't have any corporate language, company running it? How many? Python, Go, Rust, all of them are based on companies that drive it. We don't do that. It's all volunteer work. But you know, there's a problem with this. Corporate gives you dedicated time. You don't have dedicated time here. Corporate gives you a project vision because you have to, because you have dedicated time. Corporate gives you commercial planning. Where are you taking it? How are you marketing it? One of the things that we're not good at is marketing. You know why? None of us are companies. It's not what we do. And improve tooling because a company needs it. But we don't do this with Perl. We fought really hard for no company to actually own that thing. We love it, and it's great. But if we wanted to succeed with companies, we need to have also a drive of a company as well. So, okay, here's what I'm offering. I think it is possible to do. First, we will need to have a clear definition of the core team. Right now, we don't really know who the core team of Perl is. We know that there are a bunch of people. I'm one of them. But the rest, it's pretty vague. We want to have a steering committee, because if we can have a steering committee with TPF and with several stakeholders, commercial stakeholders, sorry, then we could really decide where we're taking the language and how. We can have commercial leadership. We can ask TPF to petition vendors for libraries. So TPF could approach companies and say, you wrote this thing, we would like a Perl library. Instead of, I don't know how many people know this, usually what we do is open tickets in Google Code. It does not work, no matter how many people star it. We can collect all the libraries that we want to have ported, that the vendors won't port, but we know those are targets, things that we want supported in Perl, so people could use Perl for those things. That includes offering grants, specifically for porting, for features, for fixes. One idea that Jim had was, we can offer grants, sure, but we can also have an entire hackathon dedicated to porting. We can have rethought documentation, documentation that starts from a beginner, not from the implementation. No one cares. Put it at the end. We should have documentation that addresses people, users, beginners. It needs to be simple, it needs to be consistent. So, I'm ending you with this. What kind of Perl do we want to have? And I want Perl that I could use for machine learning, for graphic design, for games, for mobile stuff, for high-end services, for building scalable systems. Do you? Ish? Do you want to use machine learning? Do you want to be able to do that with Perl? How about writing games with Perl? That's kind of what I want. Like, I want to do this. I want to be able to do all these things with Perl. And I think it also goes to which kind of community do we want? Do we want a community where it's us? And that's great. I love everyone here. I do. But I also want more people. I want a variety of people. I want designers. I want data scientists. I want machine learning engineers. I want mobile developers to come here because they have things to do with Perl. I want more web, more backend, more front-end stuff. So I think this is really what we want to do. And if this is something that we want to do, I can tell you this is what we're going to work on for a while. This is what I'm going to work on for a while, and I hope to update you on how that's going. And I think if this is something that we want to do, then we could do it. We have to put effort into this. We have to know this is what we want to have for our language, for our community. That's it. Thank you very much.